Hi, I'm CJ and this is my RC channel. This is the end result we're hoping for, where our leading edges line up perfectly so that we have equal angles in our dihedral. Can't get much better than that, so I'm really happy. And again, that also has a lot to do with the engineering that was done by the designer and the way it was planned out. Right now, I need to put together the wing connectors that join the three main wing sections and allow that wing to be disassembled into three pieces. So you've probably already cut these items out. There's different ones. You've got two types. You've got four that have a short piece here with the hole, and four with the long ones. The long ones are going to be the ones that go inside the main wing section on either left and right side. The other ones, the short ones, go in the outer wing sections, and this has to do with alignment more than anything else. Now, the little holes are there so you can orient top and bottom. And you'll notice that the holes, these are also going to orient the outside of the wing. So, in other words, they're going to go into the wing like this. Sorry about the shake there. Okay, so the hole not only points outwards, it also points up. And the reason for that is that if you notice, the cuts here have an angle to them. So I'm going to go ahead and start assembling one of these for you and show you how this basically goes together. Now, they're a little tight, and sometimes you might have to like flip it around. Also, you want the upper hole to be facing to the outward side. And I will explain why in just a moment. Okay, now you can see that this is at an angle, and remember, our inner joint here has a 5-degree dihedral on either side, so that's 10 degrees total. So you take some pieces of scrap, stack them up, lay these pieces down here with the holes facing upward, as it would be going into the wing, and we can hold our dihedral brace here and we can confirm our angle, and we may need to adjust that or push it in a little further to get that angle more or less correct. And we can do some finish sanding on this once it's in the wing, but yeah, see that by having that set up there. I'm sorry, I'm doing that out of view of the camera. Okay. I want to lay this on a flat surface and measure this angle here. Okay. So I've just taken a couple pieces of scrap balsa and I'm laying this on top like that so that I can slide this dihedral brace up against it and confirm that I've got 5 degrees there. So that one's ready to glue there. Now I need to put in the other side. And this one, the large hole faces downward. These things seem to have a side that's easier to get the insert in on it than the other. Now this side we're not worried about angle because this is going to be deep inside the wing. But what this is doing is this is creating a dihedral brace. So our little aluminum tubes are going to be at an angle. They're high at one end and low at the other. You want to press this in all the way. Okay, so what this does is, if I put my carbon fiber joiner in this hole here, see, now you should be able to see the angling, okay? And again, the outside should be high, the inside low. So you want to make 2 of these, just like this, and you can just use thin CA to glue these together. And leave these pieces here sticking out, because there's a little piece of plywood. It's part number W7. It's on the same sheet as these. In other words, if you're looking at the piece of ply that you cut these strips out of, it's right here between them. And we're going to use that as kind of a gauge. So when you slide this into the wing, you're going to place this underneath these edges here, like that. And that is going to help you line this up, because if you, just like the fiberglass wing braces we used on the outer wing tips, the more, if you rotate this left or right, you're reducing the amount of angle. Not only are you angling it off to one side or the other, but you're also reducing the angle going upwards, and we don't want that. So once these are glued, you're going to test fit them, and then we're going to glue them into the wing. And once we are satisfied with positioning, we can pull this out of the way, and when it's dry, we can trim those off. So now that I've got this one assembled, I'm just going to take some thin CA here, and I'm just going to go and put a few drops. And you don't have to go overboard. It really doesn't matter, because later on we're going to be using some 5-minute epoxy in here. Mainly we just want this to stay together, and we want the aluminum tube to stay in place. So we can go ahead and put a little drop on that as well. Okay, now there's something that isn't in the instructions that I'm going to do that's a little different. I'm going to take some scrap wood, and I'm basically going to cut a little plug to put in the end here. If you take any 2 of these aluminum tubes and you stand them up one on top of the other, you'll see that they are taller than the carbon fiber connector. Now think about this wing here, the center section, or even the outer sections. If this tube slides into the wing, it's not going to go very far, but because it's pointing at a downward angle, so it's going to, it's going to impact the carbon and not be able to go all the way in. So you're not going to lose it into the wing, but it might be enough to be able to get to the end here where you can't reach it and pull it out easily. Just to make your life easy, I would put a small disc of balsa wood in the end here and glue that, and basically make a plug at the back side of your braces. That way you know that when these carbon fiber rods are inserted, that they are not going to go, more in than you want them to. You don't want them to go further. Now also, I hate having to carry these around as a second item, where I've got a wing and then I've got to, find a pocket to stick these in. I may permanently glue these into the wing on one side, and if I do that, I'll do it to the outer wings, because the outer wings are shorter than the center section. So if you're stacking the 3 wing sections together, having this stick out of the outer wing section by, you know, the halfway point is only a couple of inches. It's not going to be a problem. These are solid. They're not tubes. These are never going to break. If you break this, the wing is destroyed. So there's no, you know, thinking that, oh, I may have to replace these someday. So gluing them into the outer wings so that you just plug them together and you don't have to worry about, you know, dropping one of these, leaving it at home, things like that. Go ahead and make all 4 of these. The outer wing section ones are the same. You're going to want the same 5-degree angle in them. They're just not going to have these little pins sticking out. So bear that in mind. I'm going to assemble all 4 of them and come back in a moment. Okay, I am gluing the first tube in. I've already swizzled a little bit of glue into this spar here. I'm just adding a little bit more, basically just rolling it around in there, so when I push this in like a plunger, it's going to make a nice pile of glue at the back end of this. And I did put little plugs in like I said I was going to. So now I'm going to take some more of this 15-minute epoxy, and I highly recommend using a longer epoxy like 15-minute. And I'm just gonna reinforce this a little bit right here. I just want to make sure that this aluminum tube doesn't go anywhere. I want to make sure it's joined well, and I'm gonna put a little more glue right here, and then I'm gonna, once this is in, I'm gonna make some other, so I'm just gonna kind of make sure that I've got, by going back and forth like this, I'm getting glue all over the inner end like a piston. Okay, and now that I'm here, I'm gonna add more glue. Like this. Add some more here. Okay, and now I can just slide this in that last bit. And now need to use this little jig right here to kind of line this up. I'm just doing it by hand so I can get some, see how I can rotate this by changing the pressure on either finger. So now that I've got that level, I know that I'm straight. I can just I'm going to push that in a teeny bit more. I want to make sure I'm totally flush. So the top will be in a little further. I want to make sure I don't have any excess glue on here. I just smeared some on there by accident. Just get a paper towel and do a little cleanup. Okay. Now I'm just going to confirm that I'm level again. So we are good to go. I can move this out of the way, clean it off, and that can just sit and dry. So that is done. So once this is dry, I'll mix up some more and do the other side, and then I'm basically going to repeat this process, excuse me, on the outside wings. We don't have those little tabs, so we're kind of going to have to do that by eye, but it's the same process. So this is really winding up. The next steps after I do this, and I'll show you anything that comes up along the way in that process. The last step is going to be, well, steps, there's a few. I need to sheet the inner section of the center section of the wing, and I need to do the stabilizer, the horizontal stabilizer, mount that up. We've got push rods to install. I am not going to use the included pull cords. I'm just not a big fan of that DLG style tail actuation where you have a spring that holds like your rudder in one direction and a pull cord that holds its center and then pulls it past, and then the spring returns it when you release tension. I don't necessarily trust that spring to hold up under high levels of airflow. I'd rather have a push rod where I've got a firm actuation forward and backwards. So I'm using some very thin carbon fiber rods and some thin, it's called Pt8 tubing. It's basically a thin plastic hose that basically acts as a housing for the carbon fiber push rods. And the combination is extremely light. It's not as light as the pull cords, but it's pretty darn close. It's certainly a whole lot lighter than you know, standard push rods like golden rods or something like that, because we are trying to keep the tail section as light as possible. But it definitely is, I think, more reliable. You know, I don't have that much experience with the spring system, so I can't really knock it too hard. I just don't know if I trust it, where if you're like in a dive and you need to pull out hard or something like that, and you're relying on that spring to push the control surface into the wind, you know, I'm worried that the wind might win over the spring, and you know, you might not get the response you're hoping for from your controls, and thus crash. So anyway, I'm upgrading this, or changing from the pull style. I didn't notice the actual springs in here in the kit. There's a bunch of hardware in here, and we have these pull cords, but they don't provide the springs, and I don't recall any spring wire in the kit. I'll take another look in the box and see if I can find something like that. But you basically need to build that spring, and you can purchase those if you want to go that way. The same place that I bought my Fresh, which is the only place I know of that sells them, hyperflight.co.uk, they sell those DLG springs as separate items for just, you know, building your own planes or upgrading other kits. So if you want to go that way, that's probably where you're going to want to find it. I'm still also deciding on whether or not to use the magnets in the wings or not, because I always use wing tape. So you know, we've already got a you know, pins that go in here and here that orient the wing correctly. We've got our big center spar carbon fiber connecting rod, and you know, is it really necessary to have those magnets there if you're going to use wing tape anyway? And even if you use the magnets, always use wing tape. The aerodynamic penalty of having any air gap in between those two surfaces, no matter how small, is too high a price to pay. It creates a tremendous amount of drag, and it you know, has an effect outward from its position. So I can't give you the aerodynamic specs on that. It would, you know, it totally depends on the size of the crack, how fast the airfoil's moving through the air, which airfoil we're talking about, yada yada yada, you know, 1,000 variables. But it is a big factor, even if it doesn't look like one. So always use wing tape. Well, I just am doing a test fit with the carbon fiber rods for the wing joiners. Everything lines up absolutely perfectly. This is really sweet. And I took my little digital angle finder here and used a piece of wood as a you know, like to balance across multiple ribs to get a good reading. And the angle left and right is accurate to 1/100th of a degree. It's perfect. The pieces that they provide, if you use their stuff properly, you are going to get a really accurate wing. The dihedral literally was 7.79 degrees on one side and 7.78 degrees on the other. 1/100th of a degree of difference. I mean, that's like a human hair or less of difference and variation. I mean, it's fantastic. This is just a wonderful kit. I'm really impressed. I mean, yeah, I did a good job. I'm an experienced builder. At the same time, I've had planes where, you know, there's just the margin of error is vast compared to this. It's just fantastic. All 4 of the dihedral points have just been spot on accurate, and most importantly, equal to each other. And that's the most important part, that the left side is the same as the right side, and they are just, you know, beyond perfection. A 100th of a degree it's amazing it's even measurable. So I'm really happy with this, the way it's going. I'm going to go ahead and put in the pins to orient these. I'm going to go ahead and put in the magnets, even though I use tape. I figure it's just another level of protection or whatever. Just going to go ahead and do it. They provide them. I'm going to put them in. And so that's, you know, not something I even need to show. Basically, you're just taking the oh, where's the bag of parts? Here we go. You're going to use the large magnets here, and you know, make sure that they're facing the right direction. In fact, one way to do it, to be really sure you're doing it right, would be to put a piece of plastic in between the 2 wings, and then push the magnets in so they latch onto each other, and have that plastic be the barrier between them. That way you're not going to have to worry about glue, and then you can just put in glue from either side and anchor these in place with CA and or, you know, some epoxy, whichever way you want to go. But that way, you know, they're at the right spot in the wings. You know, they're touching each other, and you've got that piece of plastic to prevent them from getting glued to each other or the wings getting glued together. So that's how I'm probably going to do it, and that's what I would recommend. So as soon as I get that done and I put in the little pins that are going to connect the wings together or make sure that they're oriented, I'm going to go ahead and start working on the sheeting and working on the spoiler. So before we can finish the spoiler, we got to get that bottom sheeting in place, get the top sheeting in, and we're gonna move on to the elevator after we finish the wing. I may put some little gussets at the corners here, here, and here, and at the outer wingtips. There's a lot of little cleanup things to do, and I'll try to show every one of those to you as I go through them. Just things that are going to make for a more reliable kit. You know, make this a little stronger. I have found through incident that the carbon fiber leading edges are really strong. I tagged a wing on a metal pole the other day. I was the camera angle doesn't show it properly because my wife was shooting and I was at the other end of the field, so you've got a pretty close up on the plane tagging the the pole and then, you know, spinning down and landing on the ground, or falling to the ground, not landing. In any event, I was, you know, a good distance away from the pole, and the airplane was between me and the pole, and, you know, depth perception not being perfect, I thought I was still had room, and ended up tagging the pole. In any event, there was no damage whatsoever to the wing. Normally, if you've got a balsa leading edge, that's the kind of thing that would, you know, bust inward. It would, you know, split one of the ribs or two of them and cave them in a bit, things like that. And the carbon fiber is so resilient that there was absolutely no damage whatsoever. The covering, you know, didn't even get loosened or anything like that. So this is, of course, with a different plane. That was the Chrysalis, which is an excellent 2-meter RES glider in its own right. I think it's more difficult to build by far than this, though. It's going to be interesting to fly the planes together one of these afternoons and see how they compare. You know, and that's all relative to what you like. Personally, I prefer X-tail over V-tail. That's just me. I've flown V-tails for decades, and you know, they're all fine, but a V-tail creates more of a, you're more skidding the rear around than you are yawing the glider with the way you get with a rudder, because you don't have true up and down. You're, you know, and true left and right. You're definitely closer to true up and down, but it's, again, it's like, it's just odd. It's I just don't think they handle quite as well. You know, there's a lot of hotliner kits out there that have V-tails. At the same time, if you look at the really high performance gliders and airplanes, pattern ships, planes that do 3D aerobatics, really high speed gliders like slope soarers or pylon racers, they all have an X-tail. None of them have V-tails. So that says a lot right there. So anyway, I'm gonna pull these apart. I'm gonna glue the pins in. The orientation pins in the wing I'm gonna place in the on the outer wing section, because those are the shorter. And then I'm gonna go ahead and do the magnets the way I described. And when I come back to the video, we'll be working on sheeting, and I'll go through that whole process with you in as much detail as I can. So I'm starting the sheeting process, and what you want to do is cut 2 pieces of some of this stock that we have left over. You should have a good bit of it left. Cut 2 pieces that are the width of the space between the center ribs and the first outer, and once you have those cut, you want to sand a round groove like that into it. I used a small round rat tail file. You could use, in the absence of a file, something like a small piece of music wire that you wrap in sandpaper. Maybe you could use an X-Acto knife to cut a V in here and get the process started, and then sand from there. In any event, you want to shape it so that it's going to fit on here, and you want to line them up. You want to make it deep enough that they pretty much come to the edges of these notches here, so that when we put a piece of sheeting in place, it's going to come right in there like that and fill those gaps. So I may need to flip this one around. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. So that's what we're looking for. I may grind a little more off this edge here to try to line that up a little bit better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it off. I'm going to put some CA in this space right here and on either edge, and slide them into place, let them dry, and then we'll move on with the sheeting. But this is the first step in that process. Don't worry if they're a little rough as far as like the edge here and stuff like that. This is all going to get sanded, so we'll be refining that later. And don't worry about the bottom, focus on the top edge. Take a piece of, we have this thin balsa wood here, and it's about a millimeter and a half, and this is what we're going to use for sheeting. You can start by just holding it above like this and tracing on both sides with a pencil and your cutout, and then go ahead and make those cuts. And so here's the piece that we're going to lay down here, and I'm just going to put some CA here on the ribs. Now, when you're doing stuff like that, it's good to have like a sheet of plastic around that you can lay across certain areas to hold them down so you don't glue yourself to the model. And of course, all this is going to get sanded smooth. Any areas that need to be filled will get filled, and we'll take care of that. So I was a little off on a cut here. Actually, I seem to have placed this a little offline. I must have been focusing on getting this lined up. In any event, that can all be filled. Just, you know, cut a small wedge, slide it in place, glue it, you're done. So I'm going to go ahead and add some glue down here on the underside. You're not going to be able to see this, sorry. Basically, I just put a little glue along here on either side of that piece of plywood or balsa. Actually, on the top it's balsa, on the bottom it's a piece of plywood, just to get that anchored. And so now I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to lay down a piece of balsa from here rearward, you know, have it upside down so I can mark around this cutout, make sure I get the piece the right size, and then I'm going to go ahead and glue that in place. And I'll just move on. Same thing on the underside. So here's my first piece of sheeting for this section. I haven't glued it yet. I was just test fitting it. And then I'll put another piece down here. And I'm going to sheet this right up to the back edge, because then I'm going to sand off any, well, first cut and then sand any extra. So we get a nice smooth surface all the way to the tail. Just reinforce that trailing edge a little bit. Okay, so in a minute when that's dry, I'll go ahead and trim that from below, and I'm going to do a little reinforcing underneath. So I'll flip it over and add some extra glue, and the top will be sheeted. Okay, now to the bottom. I cut a couple of pieces that are the correct width, and on the forward one we have this little inconsistency with the angling of the pieces that we'd put in from above, and there's the, so I notched this piece here and then beveled the two forward pieces here. So this is basically gonna fill that that spot there quite nicely, and then it can be sanded smooth. So I just need to lay down some glue and then make sure I put this in position straight. Put a little extra glue here and here. Oops. This is a different glue. Can't remember where I got this. It's called MaxiCure Travis RC, Orlando, Florida. It's an extra thick cryocrylate. That's why it works well for doing this process. Normally I prefer thin CAs, but when you need to lay down a bead of glue and then put a piece down on top, you want a thick CA, but it's, in spite of it being thick, it's almost instantaneous grab, so you have to be quick about it for sure. But it's very nice. I like it. Like I said, normally I use the Zap and the thin stuff, but I am out of it at the moment and couldn't get up to the store today, so I didn't want to stop. And as I said, this seems to work really well for this particular task anyway. Being thick, it waits for you, as it were. Oh shoot, I shouldn't have put that down because there's that notch I need to fill too. Always keep a paper towel handy. Okay, what I was worried about is the sheeting really needs to end here because it's a lower level. I was going to cover up over that edge there and that like I did on the top, but that's not what we want to do. So I need to measure this. Okay, so just like the forward edge here, I've cut some notches, and now I'm going to lay down the glue. So I'm just going to hold this till it dries, and there'll be a little bit of sanding and trimming to complete this process, but the sheeting of the center of the wing is pretty much done. So I have sanded and smoothed, being very careful not to damage the leading edge of the carbon fiber. I've sanded down these blocks here to make them level and smooth. I still need to do the trailing edge there. What I'm probably going to do, just to add a little bit of strength up to the front here, is I'm going to take some very thin fiberglass cloth and just do a single layer that maybe starts, about here and wraps around and under about the same distance, just to beef this up a little bit, make it a little stronger, a little more, resistant to torsional stresses that might come from an outer wing impact or bad landing or whatever. And again, not in the instructions, but something I'm going to do if you decide to do it too. I would recommend it. It looks like a definite weak spot. Like I said, I'm going to be doing some other little cleanups, like some gussets here. Just basically a little triangle of balsa. I'll probably round out its edge a little bit so that it conforms to the shape of the leading edge, and maybe about a triangle that's about a 1/2 inch by a 1/2 inch, something like that. Just to not to like strengthen the rib. The rib is plenty strong. It's 2 layers of balsa and ply, but to strengthen the joint where the carbon fiber attaches here. That's definitely a spot that we want to reinforce if possible, and this is an easy way to do it. So I'll be going over those items later on, probably in the next video, and in that video I'll also be finishing off the spoiler here and talking about servo mounting and things like that. I'm going to need to make a hole here to pass through the servo wire, so a lot of stuff is going to come into play. I've already done the holes on the bottom side here. All you really need to do is stick a pin through from the top and then take an X-Acto knife and just kind of cut around in a circle. or you could use a drill bit. However you decide to do it, it's up to you. So we are definitely in the final stages, and the last big thing is going to be the stabilizer. I have shaped the fuselage and done all the sanding I'm going to do on that. I'll just pull that forward here and show you. I did this off camera a while back. There's a few little places I might fill just to level things out, but it's not necessary. It's not a structural strength issue. And I've sanded the fuselage, and I recommend making sure that you like take a push pin, push it through those holes, and then just kind of auger it around a little bit to stretch out the hole in the balsa. If you do use one of those holes or multiple holes for your tow hook, you are going to be making this balsa hole larger anyway, and the balsa does not provide any structural strength. It's all in that multiple layer of plywood below. That's what the tow hook is really biting into. But you want to be able to find those holes after it's done, and once you apply cover here, you'll be able to see the little dimples where those holes are. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please click like and please subscribe to my channel.